Imagine for just a second that you're stepping right up onto the conductor's podium. The whole hall goes totally quiet. The musicians are watching you, waiting, and spread out right there in front of you is this giant, perfectly engineered machine. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a spatial stage tour of the Symphony Orchestra. We're going to explore exactly how this massive collective of musicians is physically organized on stage, and really dive into how the actual mechanics of their instruments dictate exactly where they have to sit.
So, here's our seating chart or agenda for today's tour. Number 1, we'll meet the orchestra, then we'll check out the string family, move on to the woodwind family, hit the brass powerhouse, check out the percussion engine, and finally wrap it all up with some essential orchestra facts.
Let's jump right into the macro view. The orchestra is basically split up into 4 main families: strings, woodwinds, brass, and percussion. And if you look at how they're arranged, it is absolutely not random. Strings sit right at the very front edge of the stage, followed by the woodwinds, then the brass behind them, and finally, all the way at the back, the percussion. Just keep this acoustic map in the back of your mind as we go.
Section 1. Meet the orchestra. Section 2. The string family.
All right, so sitting front and center, taking up by far the most real estate on stage, we have the strings. This massive section perfectly shows off one of the most fundamental rules of acoustics. I like to call it the rule of size. On one end of the spectrum, you've got the violin, which is the smallest and highest pitched of the main bowed strings, reading right off the treble clef. And then literally on the exact opposite end, you've got the double bass. It's the absolute largest and lowest string instrument. It actually sounds a full octave lower than what's written on the page. So the rule is super simple here. A smaller instrument makes a higher pitch, and a larger one makes a lower, deeper pitch. Makes sense, right?
Now, to fill in that sonic gap between the high violin and that super low double bass, we have the viola, which is just a bit bigger than the violin, and the violoncello, or you probably just call it the cello, which is larger still and played held right between the knees. But what really unifies this family isn't just that they all have that similar beautiful wooden shape. It's how they actually make a sound. The strings vibrate either when you draw a bow across them or when you pluck them with your fingers. And because they produce this warm, unified sound instead of something super piercing, well, you actually need a whole lot of them right at the front of the stage just to balance out the much louder instruments sitting behind them.
Section 3. The woodwind family.
Okay, step just past those strings into the second row, and suddenly all that visual uniformity completely disappears. Welcome to the woodwind section. Here, players make a sound by blowing air into or across their instruments. But the real defining mechanic for most of this family comes down to this tiny little marvel, the reed. Now sure, some woodwinds like the flute or the piccolo are totally reedless. The player just blows air directly across an opening, kind of like blowing over a glass bottle. But others use a single piece of material vibrating against a mouthpiece, and some, get this, actually use 2 reeds vibrating against each other.
I've got to say, there is just a massive amount of personality packed into this single row of musicians. The woodwinds are basically the quirky character actors of the whole orchestra. You've got the piccolo, this tiny reedless instrument that sounds a whole octave higher than written. Then there's the oboe, which is a double reed instrument that actually holds a tom of authority. I mean, it's the oboe that gives the official tuning note A to the entire orchestra before the conductor even steps on stage. Then you have the clarinet, standing totally alone as the only main orchestral woodwind that uses a single reed. And finally, you've got the double reed heavyweights, the bassoon, which people affectionately call the clown of the orchestra because of its deep, kind of comical tone, and the massive double bassoon, which is the absolute lowest woodwind out there.
Section 4. The brass powerhouse.
Moving right behind those quirky woodwinds, we hit the absolute muscle of the symphony. Generating this kind of massive sound is actually a fascinating 3-step journey. Step 1, it all starts at the cup-shaped mouthpiece. But unlike woodwinds, there's no reed here. Nope, the player actually vibrates their own lips. If they tighten their lips, the pitch goes up, loosen them, it goes down. Step 2, that vibrating air travels through a metal tube. By pressing down on valves or moving a slide, the player instantly changes how long that tube is. Remember our rule of size? A longer tube means a lower note. And then step 3, the sound hits the flared bell at the end, which basically acts like a megaphone to strengthen and blast that sound out to the audience. Oh, and sometimes players will literally shove a mute inside that bell to completely change the tone quality, which is pretty cool.
So the brass family basically has 4 main members, and they're perfectly stratified by pitch. Right at the top, you've got the trumpet. It's the highest main brass instrument, super famous for its bright tone and those 3 valves on top. Sitting right in the middle range is the French horn, which, fun fact, actually evolved from old hunting horns. French horn players do something completely unique. They use valves, but they also physically stick their hand inside the bell to help change the pitch. Crazy, right? Then we have the trombone, holding down that middle to low range. Notice that the trombone is the only main brass instrument that uses a big, movable slide instead of valves to change the tube length. And finally, holding down the absolute bottom is the mighty tuba, the biggest, lowest main brass instrument with a super deep, resonant sound.
Now, all of this brass anatomy requires a mechanical feature that is, well, it's delightfully gross but absolutely necessary. The spit valve. See, because brass players are buzzing their lips and blowing warm air through literally feet of metal tubing, condensation builds up inside really fast. The spit valve is just this little release lever that lets them dump this moisture right out of the instrument so the vibrating air doesn't get all gurgly and obstructed. It's a very glamorous job playing the brass, let me tell you.
Section 5. The percussion engine. Okay, we finally reached the very back wall of the stage. We find the instruments here are so physically powerful that they literally have to sit way back there just so they don't completely drown out the strings. The percussion section boasts the greatest variety of instruments in the entire orchestra, for sure. Basically, if a sound is made by striking, shaking, or scraping, it lives here. But functionally, this family is split into two really distinct camps. On one side, you have definite pitch percussion. These are instruments like the timpani, the xylophone, or the marimba. They produce actual named notes, which means a percussionist can play a recognizable melody right on them. On the flip side, you've got indefinite pitch percussion. Think snare drums, cymbals, the triangle. These produce brilliant driving sounds, but without any fixed musical pitch. They aren't there to play the melody. They're there to provide the impact, the texture, and really the driving heartbeat of the whole piece.
Section 6. Essential Orchestra Facts. All right, let's wrap this up with your ultimate cheat sheet to the orchestra's superlatives. Just a quick summary of the extreme highs, lows, and strengths we've talked about today. The strings definitely take the crown for the largest section overall. The brass easily takes the title for the strongest section, while percussion brings the rhythm and just the sheer variety of sounds. We also saw that rule of size in action over and over again. The tiny piccolo soaring away as the highest woodwind, perfectly counterbalanced by the massive double bassoon as the lowest. We saw the bright trumpet as the highest brass, anchored down by the deep tuba. And through it all, you really start to see how stage placement, putting the dozens of quieter strings right up front and the powerful booming brass and percussion all the way in the back, creates this perfectly balanced acoustic machine. So I'm going to leave you with a question to take away. Now that you know exactly how the rule of size dictates pitch, how reeds and slides actually work, and precisely where the strings, woodwinds, brass, and percussion sit on that stage, how's this going to change the way you listen to your favorite movie score or symphony? Honestly, the next time you hear a soaring melody or a massive thundering climax in a movie theater, try to visualize the stage. Map the sound in your mind, front to back. I guarantee you, once you understand the actual machinery of the orchestra, you'll never hear the music exactly the same way again. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep listening closely.